Okay, so welcome again. Today's lesson is all about biogeochemical cycles. Today is not November 24th. It's actually November 30th, the last day of the month. But we are a day behind, and so this lesson was supposed to be covered on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, before we went on our 5-day break. But here we are getting to it now. That's perfectly okay. We did not, however, do those presentations that you all were supposed to do, and that was really my fault because I didn't plan for the EOC training to take as long as it did. But we do still need to do that. So you guys have gotten basically an extension to do that. Some of you still have not added your presentation to the shared Google folder. I need you to do that. All of the instructions in order to do that are on Canvas, but I also covered it in class last week. So you still have an opportunity to go back and look at that lesson and figure it out that way as well. But today's lesson should be pretty quick. It's going to be stuff that you all probably remember from Earth and environmental science. The objective is to analyze the flow of matter through biotic and abiotic factors by dissecting diagrams. And the essential question, why are biotic factors dependent on abiotic factors? So go ahead and write down the title of today's lesson, as well as you can write down today's date, 11/30/2020, and the fact that it is the 4th lesson of our 9th unit. Okay. So biogeochemical, what do we think that means? Biogeochemical. Any thoughts as to what the word biogeochemical means? Well, let's break it down. I'm sure we know what bio means. What does bio mean?
Life.
Good. It means elements of life. We also have geo and chemical. Geo represents the elements of Earth, and then chemical are the natural atoms and molecules, such as oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, water, carbon dioxide, glucose. These are the natural atoms and molecules that are a part of the equation as well. So as we think about these biogeochemical cycles, we need to be thinking about how elements of Earth, elements of life, and these natural atoms and molecules circulate and benefit from the presence of one another. Thank you for joining us, Angel. So these biogeochemical cycles represent the way in which chemical elements flow between living organisms. Of course, we use the word biotic to describe those living organisms, and their physical environment, which we use the word abiotic to describe. Possibly the two most important cycles that we will discuss are the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. And when we say cycle, what we're seeing and what we have to be aware of is that these things are circulating. So they might start off in a gaseous form somewhere in the atmosphere, and then they are incorporated into a solid form somewhere on the surface of the Earth in the lithosphere. So maybe these are some terms that are starting to come back to you from your Earth and Environmental Science class. But we should be able to see in these two diagrams on your screen how carbon in its own cycle and nitrogen in its own cycle constantly circulate. So really at the foundation of these cycles is the law of conservation of mass, which states that matter is neither created nor destroyed. This means that even though it might change forms from solid to liquid to gas, or from gas straight to solid, or it might change forms chemically so that water becomes hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, the amount of mass and the amount of matter that is present is unchanging. If I start off with 100 grams of ice cubes, then I'm also going to have 100 grams of liquid water once those ice cubes melt. The water itself is not disappearing. It's just changing forms. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Omari, for joining us. So please make sure that you write down the law of conservation of mass. That's a pretty important concept throughout chemistry and biology and even physics. So the amount of matter, and matter is really anything that takes up space. Anything that takes up space is matter. We're not talking about a lot of space. Of course, the smallest atom, a hydrogen atom, still has matter. It still constitutes matter, even though it takes up very, very little space. What we're saying is that the total amount of matter on Earth is relatively constant. Things don't just simply disappear into thin air. When something burns, the matter that once constituted that solid is being turned into a gaseous form. Any questions about anything up to this point? Okay, great. So the amount of carbon on Earth is relatively constant. But of course, over the last 200 years, humans have increasingly altered how carbon flows into our atmosphere. So we've really thrown off the cycle. Of course, we know that plants produce carbon dioxide, and so do human beings when we undergo cellular respiration. And that carbon dioxide is then needed by the plants to do photosynthesis. And so the Earth was set up in a pretty constant or consistent system in which the amount of carbon dioxide that was produced was then balanced out by what was needed in our atmosphere to protect the Earth from UV radiation. And that was also balanced out by the amount of carbon dioxide that plants need. But since the Industrial Revolution, and this is something that you all explored in an asynchronous assignment recently, during the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels were burned. And those fossil fuels contributed much more carbon to the atmosphere than we could have ever anticipated. And it's really at the center of the many issues that face us as it relates to our environment today. So the cycle was thrown off. But it's still a very important cycle. It's an important phenomenon. As all living things that we are aware of, require carbon. They are made of carbon. Their genetic material has carbon in it. They need carbon to make energy. And so carbon is essential. This is why we can find it pretty abundantly throughout our planet, whether it's in the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the biosphere, or the atmosphere. So keep in mind that it's not just on land that we are talking about carbon. Carbon and carbon dioxide are also absorbed by marine life. So phytoplankton in the ocean undergoes photosynthesis. That's how they produce their food. They don't eat. They're photosynthetic organisms. Of course, photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide. So they are intaking a lot of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And this is why you'll hear the ocean referred to as what's called a carbon sink. The carbon is being sunk into the ocean. It's absorbing a lot of the carbon. And then, of course, once they undergo cellular respiration, they also produce carbon dioxide, some of which is taken up by other organisms in the ocean. So I've already touched on it a little bit, and perhaps you remember this from Unit 4, but carbon is a very important element exchanged between animals and plants through the processes of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So both processes involve carbon, but they involve carbon in slightly different forms. Just like water can come in different forms, water can be a vapor, it could be a liquid, or it could be a solid, ice. Carbon also can appear in these different forms under different conditions. So the carbon cycle is responsible for taking carbon from one form and returning it into another. So the carbon cycle moves it moves carbon between its gaseous form, which is carbon dioxide, and its solid form, which is glucose. Producers, which are the plants, they produce their own food, use carbon dioxide to turn it into glucose through this process of photosynthesis. That glucose is then consumed by heterotrophs, and it's turned into the carbon dioxide through cellular respiration. So we see the cycle is set up. Carbon dioxide is used to make glucose. Burning glucose produces carbon dioxide. Now remember, while only autotrophs do photosynthesis, only organisms that need to produce their own food do photosynthesis. That would be plants and algae. Cellular respiration is a universal aspect of life. All living organisms do cellular respiration. All right. Another important aspect of the carbon cycle are decomposers, like fungi or soil bacteria or scavengers. These help the process of decomposition. These are organisms that speed that up, and they allow carbon to return into the earth. They allow solid carbon that was once incorporated within the body of an organism to provide food to certain other organisms or to fertilize the earth. Okay. We also know that other natural processes add carbon to the atmosphere. So this might be the eruption of a volcano, which is a pretty devastating event. But all of that soot that you see rising out of this volcano is actually carbon-based matter. And some of that carbon-based matter will be spread over hundreds of miles, where it can help to fertilize some soils, but it could also be damaging to some environments. But this is one way that carbon is again added into the lithosphere and the atmosphere. Forest fires, same thing. Forest fires disrupt the carbon that was incorporated into plant life as trees burn and bushes burn. But eventually, that soot that's going to be left after these are burned to the ground can be used to fertilize the soil. And so sometimes, in many places around the country, you'll see designed forest fires or designed burns. And these burns help to, again, keep the soil fresh, keep the soil fertilized, and it can also get rid of dead plants, plants that are taking up space but that aren't actually growing. All right. The other of the two most important Biogeochemical cycles is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a key component of all living organisms, and it's found, of course, in proteins and in DNA. Hopefully we remember that all the way back from Unit 1 and Unit 2. But because of this, nitrogen, because it's found in both DNA and proteins, nitrogen is an extremely important chemical in the process of protein synthesis. We need nitrogen, just like we need carbon. Nitrogen is essential to to the storage of our genetic information in the form of DNA, and it's also essential to passing on our DNA, and it's also essential to making the proteins that make us who we are, making insulin, making hormones, making melatonin, making all of the proteins and enzymes that we need to survive. So the nitrogen cycle is a bit more complicated and it involves bacteria. But in the same way, we see that nitrogen existing as a gas, we also see it existing as a solid, just like we saw in the carbon cycle. So nitrogen is the most abundant gas in our atmosphere. It makes up 78% of our atmosphere. When it rains and when there's lightning, some of that nitrogen that's a part of the atmosphere and it exists as a gas goes through this process of what's called nitrogen fixation. And nitrogen fixation makes use of the rain and the lightning to move some of that nitrogen from the atmosphere onto the surface of the earth. And then some of the bacteria that are present on earth are going to turn it from a gas into a solid. This is not something that you need to write down. I would write down these 2 bullet points, but you don't need to copy down the diagram or try to write down every word that I'm saying. All right, so here are the 3 steps of the nitrogen cycle, and I did touch on this a little bit, but we've got fixation, ammonification, which is the first step. Then we've got nitrification, and then we've got denitrification, which kind of restarts the process. So again, we've got to see this as a cycle. The third step just loops back into the first step. In the first step, bacteria, primarily bacteria that live in plants, convert nitrogen gas into ammonia, which is NH3. That's 1 nitrogen atom and 3 hydrogen atoms. The second step is nitrification, in which different types of bacteria convert the ammonia into a solid form called a nitrate. And then lastly, denitrification converts the remaining nitrates back into nitrogen gas, where it will return to the atmosphere. Okay, so hopefully you are finishing writing this down so we can move on. This is kind of awkward to look at here. Oh, my mouse is kind of frozen. But we also should acknowledge that nitrogen can exist in solid forms. Nitrogen that we eat is, of course, in a solid form, and we get it through vegetables. But then also livestock, when they poop, some of their poop is also nitrogen, and it returns nitrogen as a solid to the earth. All right, so we've got 40 minutes left in class. It's 10:55, and there's nothing new to do. At this point, though, the exit ticket and the warm-up should be available. Let me go in and check. But they should be available to you all. So please make sure you do both the warm-up and the exit ticket from this day. But also, please make sure that you check your email so you can see your progress report. I sent it to your student emails. That progress report will tell you what assignments you need to complete. It will tell you if you have a test that you need to take. So that's a great starting point to know what you need to get done. What you'll notice about the progress report is that there are different colors for different assignments. So let me share. Okay, so the warm-up and the exit ticket are available to you on Canvas. Of course, there is no asynchronous assignment today, but I do want to show you all this. So everyone should have gotten an email that had one of these in it. And I'll zoom in so it's a bit easier to see. And it's a list of the assignments that we've had so far in this quarter. We've had 22 asynchronous assignments. We've really had 23, but I haven't counted the presentations yet. The last three, assignment number 20, number 21, and number 22, are not due until Wednesday because they are from our current 9th unit. But the others have already been due. What you'll notice is that they have different colors, and the different colors are telling you information about the assignment. Green assignments are short and easy. Blue assignments are a little bit tougher, or they might take a little bit more time. And then your purple assignments are those that take the most time, and they are probably the hardest as well. There's another color that you should notice as well, and that's red. The red asynchronous assignments are both review activities, and they're both formal. Okay, so those are worth a lot of points. If you look at your progress report, which again I sent to your student email, if you notice that you haven't done either of the red assignments, and if you also notice that perhaps you've missed an exam, then that means that your grade is way lower than it really should be, because those are all formal assignments. All right, so please make sure that you check your student email. Everybody should have gotten a personal progress report with your missing assignments filled in, as well as general comments about how you can improve your grade even further, even if you're standing at a good point. But that's what I want to do for the rest of class today. We have, at this point, 35, 36 minutes or so. What you should be doing is completing the warm-up and exit ticket from today, and then start catching up on any missing work that you can see in your progress report. Any questions about that?
When does the quarter end?
Our last day of finals is December 18th, I believe. So 19th to 20th to 20th. I think the last day of the quarter is the 22nd, which means that grades are probably due on the 21st, which is 3 weeks from today.
Also, are we going back to school to take your test and make the final?
Yes. So I'm glad you brought that up. So when you all come in to take your final exams, your EOC exam, you will need a Chromebook. So I know some of you have been using your personal laptops at home or your personal computers at home, and that's been totally fine. But when you're in school to complete the warm up and to complete the EOC exam, you will need a Chromebook. So you can come to the school, or someone, your parent can come to a school, your guardian can come to the school and pick up a Chromebook on your behalf between 7:30 and 2:00 p.m. every day. Okay, folks, I just want to remind you, we've got 15 minutes left now. I see several of you are still just looking at your warm-up and exit ticket. Please don't spend too much time on those. Those are not your big point opportunities. Your big point opportunities are still your asynchronous assignments. I can see that Gabby, who does not have many, if any, missing assignments, has moved on to work on other work. So that's a great idea. That's how people should be using their time right now. So go ahead and knock out that warm up and exit ticket really quickly so you can move on and move on to something that's going to be worth more points and will help your grade more. Remember, I sent out your progress report yesterday, and that should have all of the assignments that you were missing. Good morning. Okay. Thank you. Okay, folks, it's 11:36, so I know you all are eager to start your lunch breaks. I'm going to stop the recording, and you all are good to go. Please check your email. And if you have questions about what I sent out to you, please don't hesitate to let me know in any way at any time, and we'll work to fix the issue. Have a good day.